Hey, y'all, welcome back. I have a very special guest with me today. Please meet Catherine Lovern. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for agreeing to share your story with us. I just recently met you and I got to hear like a little condensed version. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into things today. Where do you feel like your story starts?
Well, um, I always like to start with the thing that people like to know most is how was your childhood? That's what I've got asked a million times. But my childhood really wasn't that bad from like birth to 10. It was pretty good. My dad was a preacher in a small town, and my mother was an accountant, and she did bookkeeping some places, and we grew up way out in the country, and we played outside till the street lights came on and rode our bikes on the dirt road and had four-wheelers and horses and chickens and, all the things. So the beginning was good, peaceful.
When did things kind of change for you from that peaceful young childhood?
Well, my parents got divorced twice, actually. They got divorced and then got remarried and then got divorced again. I didn't realize the things that were, as a child, the things that go on inside your home. So when my parents got divorced the second time, my mother married an alcoholic. And so that was completely 360 from the preacher. And it was hard and uncomfortable and strange. Um, in between marrying my stepdad, we bounced around from different places to different houses to my aunt's house to this one house that was in a different town that all the walls were different colors. And um, I didn't realize at that point in time that my mother was living with a mental illness of her own. Um, she was just trying to figure out how to live life, and we were drugged everywhere with her during the process. Um, I remember sometimes there was no power, sometimes there was no water. One time we moved into this one apartment that the police were always there, gunshots all the time. And it was scarce if we got new clothing. Um, there were always bugs on the floor. And then once she met my stepdad, I think in her mind, she was thinking that this would provide a better life. Um, so when I was 14 was when he started sneaking into my bedroom the first time. Of course, what do you say? What do you do? I just kind of, we had this air conditioning unit that was in the house. It was like a little cabin. And we had an air conditioning unit, and I used to stare at it a lot, kind of just waiting for it to be over. Um, Started sneaking out my window about 15. I cheered, loved it, cheered for really my whole life. And I remember after one practice, there were some kids at school smoking pot behind the dumpster. And one of my friends was like, "Hey, Catherine, come over here." And I'm like, "What? Okay, sure, why not?" And I remember the first time I ever smoked. I don't know what I thought it was supposed to be like, because all you hear is the DARE program in school. You hear them say, "Don't do drugs. This is your brain on drugs." And guess what? That did not make me not want to do drugs. That did not change my mind. That didn't educate me any. That did not show me the road that it would take after that moment. Um, just said, "Don't do it." It didn't tell me exactly why or the things that it could do. So, being curious when you're in high school, I was really in middle school at this point, and I remember feeling brave. I remember feeling bold. Um, it's like everything else kind of melted away, and everything was okay for that moment. I felt good for that moment. So I continued to smoke as with this friend and that friend and this guy. And um, since I wasn't exactly a virgin anymore, it made things easier for me with other men, I thought. So I allowed myself to look for comfort and love anywhere I could. My dad quit coming to get us on the weekends. He had a new family. He got remarried, had kids there. Her kids became their family, which is good for them. It wasn't good for me and my brother. I remember one time laying on top of my brother as my stepdad was trying to hit him with a belt, over and over and over again. I remember not being able to feel the pain at all. I couldn't feel it. And then I thought, okay, well, there's something wrong with me. I don't know if it's my adrenaline kicking in or what's happening. My brother was about 14 at the time because I was 16, and I just didn't feel it. So that's when the self harm began. One of my aunts saw like the scratches on my hands and my arms, and where I would take like the back of an earring and kind of just carve or rub or whatever. So, of course, she immediately called my mom, and my mom's like, hey, we're going to take you to this place. I didn't really think she was going to drop me off. So she took me to Atlanta, in Smyrna, to a mental health crisis unit for youth. And at the time, for her insurance covered it. So I was like, you're not going to leave me here. You think you are, but you don't know what my life is like. But when those doors shut behind me and they locked, I just remember myself like yelling at my mother, like, don't leave me here. That was the first institution that I was in. I was in there for a while. I hated sleeping there. It was cold. Come to realize years later, which you'll find out in a minute, they all smell the same. And I met lots of people in there and realized I wasn't the only one that I thought was crazy. But nobody even back then told me that nothing was wrong with me, that it was the things that had happened. There was no trauma informed approach. There was no coaching on trauma. There was no, I guess this is where I found out that things were wrong with me. People told me everything that was wrong with me, how I was doing things wrong, how I shouldn't behave a certain way. And I was put on medication for being bipolar. But a 16-year-old girl that endured trauma, the trauma that I endured wasn't emotional and all the things. You couldn't be sure if I was bipolar or not, if it was trauma induced. And so I got put on medication. And then, of course, I went off the medication as soon as I got out of the place, which is not good for you to do, which I didn't know that at 16. So I just went back to doing the things I was doing before. I had been back in school for about 2 weeks. People wondering where I was. Told them I was on a trip to Hawaii, lied. And someone I knew that I used to ride the school bus with, he was like, hey, I got these pills. Do you want them? It was Soma's. And I was like, yeah, I do. He was like, Catherine, don't take more than one at a time. You just take one. Okay. And I had like 4, 5. Of course, I'm going to take all of them. Hello. I'm hating my life at this point. I had to go back to the place that I had no control over what was happening to me physically and emotionally and mentally. And so that was the first time I ever overdosed. I remember snippets of what was happening during that point in time. The students told me that my head just hit the desk in our algebra class. And the counselors were trying to ask me what happened. They said I told them my mom bought me Benadryl, which was a lie. But I remember my family physician actually pumping my stomach out. I remember bits and pieces. And then the next thing I remember, I was at my aunt's house where I was having the conversation with my mother about what was happening in our home, about what my stepdad was doing. And of course, she didn't believe me. And that was the first time that I felt, I think, physical pain, like where your heart and your gut hurt all at the same time and you don't know how to get it to stop. And you feel like somebody just punched you. I stayed with my aunt for a little while, and I lied and said I got a job. And I went to these trailers that were behind this old grocery store that we used to have in our small town. And that was when crank was really big. And I did a lot of crank for a lot of days. Did my family file a missing persons report? No. They just threatened to call the cops to, well, they knew that I knew. And I remember just being awake for days and days. And I don't even know what else I took. That time was such a blur. That was just such a blur. The next thing I remember was waking up on the side of the road in a ditch. And that was that moment when I was like, okay, like my whole body hurt and I couldn't move. And I was like, okay, God, if you are real, that God that I have learned about, then I need you to help me because I'm going to die if you don't. Not too long afterwards, a lady drove down the road and she picked me up. She took me to the hospital, had some broken ribs and a busted nose, contusions in my jawbones. And she got in touch with my parents and she let me come live with her. And she helped me get my GED because I'd quit school. And she helped me get a car for the first time. She helped me start going to college and I got my own place. I was doing it. I was like, yes, I can do this. You know, for the first time, I was like, I can do this. I don't need drugs or alcohol. I just needed to be removed from the environment I was in. So I was thriving. And then I met a man. My car blew up, the motor. I was like, I got to get a second job. I was working as a manager at Walmart and going to college and half asleep and just tired, you know, so tired. And I began to build my relationship with the Lord from that point. And when I met this man, I walked into a Pizza Hut and he was the general manager over several Pizza Huts in the area, in the region. And he was just there doing a check or something. I don't even know what he was doing. Really, but I was like, hey, I need a job. I need a waitressing job. Like, this is when I go to school and this is when I manage at Walmart, but I need another job because I've got to have my car fixed. And he said, you know, we're really not hiring right now. And I was like, please, you know, please, I really need this job. I would be an excellent waitress. I can do anything you want me to do. I was very headstrong even then, determined I was not going to fail this time. And so he agreed to give me a job. I worked there for about 2 weeks and he asked me on a date. I had never at this point at 19 been asked to go on a date ever. 20, I was almost 20. I had never been asked to go on a date. Never, 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 never. Okay. So he like picked me up and took me to the movies and we got something to eat. And then he took me to ice cream. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. You know, he's like Prince Charming, right? Within 6 months, I was pregnant. I was giving up my place. I was giving up everything. I quit going to school, moved in with him. We were living together. I was struggling a little, but we found out that there was something wrong with our baby's heart and that we'd have to have like a pediatric cardiologist on staff when he was born. And that, you know, we had a plan. We had a plan. His heartbeat was slower than it needed to be. And so when I went into labor, he didn't make it through the birth. He never breathed and never cried. It's sad because I never thought I could hold something and not be able to take it home. You know, he had a little bump on his face. He was beautiful. We decided to donate his body, and during this time as well, my stepdad finally admitted to my mom all the things. So she was going through the divorce and she moved out. They diagnosed her with congestive heart failure. So I don't know. I just didn't know what to do. After we had given written permission to donate his body to science, I just figured if nothing else was wrong with him except for his heart, you know, if anything in him could save somebody else's kid so they would never have to feel the way we felt, then I wanted to do that, you know.
Catherine, that was so brave of you as a parent, as a mother going through that, to be able to think forward. And for sure he helped other people. For sure he helped doctors learn more about his little baby heart. And for sure he helped other mothers and babies. And I commend you for that. I also just want to say that you're boldly telling your story, and you are such an impressive woman to be able to talk about the things that you're talking about, because it's absolutely not easy. And I don't want to hurt you, or I don't want you to come out of this interview feeling re-traumatized. And so if anything, if you need to slow down, whatever feels good to you, that's what we want. I just also want to say there are right now, thousands and thousands of 14-year-old girls going through some of the things that you were having to endure. And even if just a few of them hear your story and how you came out of it, this also is helping. And I just thank you on behalf of everybody that's going to see this and watching this now, coming out of losing your baby and your mother's divorce, your stepfather's admissions, all of this going on is probably sending an array of emotions through you. So what happened after that?
I shut down completely. I shut it off. I shut all of it off. I went home and didn't want to talk about it to anybody. Didn't want to talk about it to my family. Me and the baby's father cleaned out the room, the nursery, and we gave it to some people that we knew would need it. And the only thing that was left in that room for a while was the crib. And so I called the lady who helped save my life, and I went to work for her for about $10 an hour. We dug holes and did all kind of things and on her farm, and I just worked and I acted like it never happened. I came home from working one day, and the father of our baby that I was living with, he had broken down the crib and propped it up against the wall. And I remember walking into the bedroom, and I thought it wouldn't bother me. But that's when I lost it for the first time. It was probably about 8 weeks after. And I remember just hitting the floor and the way the carpet felt on my hands, those kind of things where you feel like you can't breathe, the kind of cries that are definitely those ugly cries. It just, and I remember him coming in there and sitting in there, because he didn't know what to do either. So I just cried and cried and cried. Then I picked myself up and I took the crib outside and put it on the car for the trash. This was in 2008. In 2009, I married that man, not for love, for sure. Because I thought nobody else could understand the pain that I had been through or what we had been through besides the father. We got along, it was the first time I'd ever been on a date, but it was just different. He got a really good job. He had a son previously, and he was a great dad. When I came home from the hospital, of course, they sent me home with Percocets, and that was everything reactivated all over again. So once that bottle was gone, I needed more. I needed to feel that euphoria. I needed to feel that fake happy, like everything in me. It was like an anger and an urge and a yearning and a desperation to feel that, to make it. So the first thing I did was start talking to the people we knew. I knew years ago. And so they were able to get me certain things. And when they were out of Percocets or oxycodone, I would go to my grandmother's house, and she always had tramadol. Tramadol doesn't work, just so everybody knows. But I would take a lot of it, and then it would work. But I would steal that from her. I'd never stolen in my life, ever. My grandmother was my biggest fan. She was the one who taught me how to cook, how to snap green beans, how to have kindness, how to love. Despite anything, she loved me. She loved me so much. She was so kind. I'd never heard, I maybe in all my life heard her cuss one time. She made sure we had every Disney movie that ever came out, cards on holidays, every holiday, Easter and Valentine's Day. We always got something, but stole from her a lot of things. I want to say good. She always let me back in, no matter what. She knew it too. In 2010, I found out that I was pregnant again. My husband at the time, he completely shut it all out. He didn't go to a doctor's visit. He didn't go to an ultrasound. He went to nothing. That was his way of dealing with it. He couldn't. So on January 14th, 2011, my son was born, and he breathed and he cried, and he was so beautiful. And you would think that would be enough. But the hospital sent me home with Percocets. And even though I had him and he was so great, he wasn't my other son either. And I would feel guilt for loving him so much and for my other son not making it for years. It was just hard, it was really hard. And so I just continued to use my two best pill dealers at the time. Opiate dealers were one of my bosses at a Fortune 500 company that I ended up working for when my son turned 8 months old. So for 5 years, I used and drank, and me and my husband did a lot of parties with other couples, and it was just not it was not good. I mean, I was physically present for my son, but I was not mentally present. My husband at the time cheated.
Catherine, a lot of women that I was incarcerated with would say that they wanted to do right. They wanted to get better for their child. They thought that maybe it's almost like this idea that society has that a child can save a mother, or a child can make a mother beat her addiction or fix her mental health or whatever is going on. And that's just not the way it is. And this is how I was, because I was in the depths with my children as well, having babies in the middle of committing my crime, quite literally. And I just remember looking at my babies thinking, I have to stop, but something inside of me couldn't. And it's because I wasn't addressing what needed to be addressed within me. It's not an outside person, even your own child, that can fix whatever is broken inside of you. And so that's clearly what was going on with you, still in your addiction, wanting to be this mother for your child, but still your addiction pulling you.
Absolutely. I said that a million times to myself, like, girl, get it together, get a grip, stop this. You have what you wanted. You have the house and the car and the jobs now, and everything looked so good from the outside, but from the inside, it was horrible. Me and my husband got to where we were sleeping in separate bedrooms. He worked night shift, I worked day shift. We lived two separate worlds. Me and my mother had kind of started to reconcile our relationship during the time, because I mean, she was on pain management at that point, congestive heart failure and multiple things. And she ended up having to have a triple bypass surgery. And so I was helping take care of her and working and taking care of my son and a house, because my husband worked night shift and I never saw him. And I was still in my early 20s, like young, like I didn't know anything. You think you do, but I knew nothing. I knew nothing. I thought I did, but the pills helped me. I remember counting the hours once I had to make them stretch, like the constant battle within my mind of, don't take too much because you got to be present. Take enough so you don't get sick. And then you have to stretch them out. So because you only have this amount of money that you can hide from your husband and pay this bill late. It was just like this crazy internal circle that never stopped. Oh God, it was so exhausting. On May the 31st, 2014, the hospital called me and said that my mom was in the hospital again, and they needed to speak to me about what was going on with her. Could I come in? And I thought, okay, great. This is something else wrong with her heart. So I leave work and I go pick up my son, and we go to the hospital. And I never imagined this happening to me, because you don't imagine things like this happening to you, but it's just like in the movies when they're about to tell you something horrible about a loved one, right? So my son, he stays in the room with my mom, and he's like, Mama, I can hear him say to her as I'm stepping outside this doorway to talk to the doctor. And he says, Mama, can I get in the bed with you? And she said, yeah, yeah, yeah. So my son's climbing up in the hospital bed with her, and he's laying there, and he had on these cute little navy blue chinos and this little Nautica yellow shirt with a navy blue sailboat. He's looking so handsome. And I remember looking back at him and said, I'll be right back. You stay here with your mama. And him walking me down the hall and into this little room. And the door was open so I could hear my son laugh, talking to my mom. And he said, your mother has leukemia because of her immune deficiency disorder. She cannot take chemo or any kind of treatment. It would kill her immediately. So she has about 3 to 6 months. Wow. I thought, no way. So they brought her home. We brought her home on hospice. And I spent 27 days taking care of my mother and watching her revert back to the child and dancing with her in the kitchen. And she died. I don't wish that on anyone ever. I remember having to crush her medicine up and give it to her through a little medicine dropper because she couldn't swallow. At this point, they were just keeping her comfortable. I would steal her morphine patches out of her hospice kit to feel something, actually to make me feel nothing. I would sneak out to the barn, take Xanax, and smoke a lot of pot during these 27 days. After she passed away, I really hit heavy. My husband had cheated, so it gave me the best opportunity just to leave. I didn't really like him. So it was just like an open door. So I moved in with my grandmother, and I think it's just because I was so broken. I didn't want to be with anybody. I just wanted comfort. So me and my son moved in with my grandmother, and I was reaching for anything that I could reach for. I met another man online on an app that turned out to be one of the worst things I'd ever. During this time, I living with my grandmother and meeting him. I went to jail a lot of times. So my Uncle David bailed me out. And then after my uncle bailed me out, they had stipulations and did like a whole intervention, a family intervention about you got to get your life together. You have a kid. My ex-husband had filed for divorce. One of the times I was in jail during the next couple years, he divorced me. I went to our final divorce decree, shackles and handcuffs. My hair looking crazy. But one of my friends did kind of braid it for me, so it didn't look bad. Thank you for friends when you're incarcerated. That's all I gotta say, because she kind of like rosied up my cheeks and did my eyebrows, did some threading in them, kind of got them looking good. And so that I didn't have to feel like I was already feeling crushed on the inside. The judge awarded him full custody. I went to rehab for a while. It was only like a 2-week program. Didn't work, got out, got back with that man. He beat the crap out of me. This went on back and forth, jail and the man, for about a couple of years. I remember we had been in a really big physical altercation, and I had gotten visitation with my son that weekend. I watched him push my son across the floor, and I waited until he finally fell asleep after days and days. And I grabbed a trash bag full of clothes and my son and started walking down the highway. I just started walking down the highway because I didn't know what else to do. I was on probation at this point because, you go to jail so many times. Also, my felony was for signing my mother's check to pay for her funeral. Small town, small bank. They knew my mother was dead. And the funeral kept calling and calling. And of course, I didn't have thousands of dollars to pay for a funeral. So she did in her bank account, but she had no will. And do you know what happens to people's money that they have no will? It goes to the bank. It goes to the state. It doesn't go to their families. It doesn't go to pay for their funerals. How crazy is that? How messed up is our system? But I signed her check to pay for her own funeral. But they got me for forgery because it was a large amount. It was a felony. And anyways, I think I really got caught for. There was so many other things, but thank you, Lord. That was the only thing I got caught for. But I just thought to myself, okay, what's my way out of this? Because this guy told me, I will kill you and your kids. You will never be with anyone else. You will not leave me. I had been isolated. I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anywhere to go. And so I called my ex-husband and I said, you have to come get my son because I can't, you have to come get him. I can't take care of him right now. So all I needed to do was go to report to probation because I knew I had been doing at this point pills and meth and alcohol for days and days and days. And so I went to report and they took me back to jail, but I knew I'd be safe there.
You felt at this point in your life safer in a jail setting than you did in real life because of your spouse at that time, or the man that you were with at that time.
I thought he was going to kill me, and he probably would have.
So you were facing your felony charge at this time also, like you got revoked, your probation got revoked because of a UA and a felony. Is that how it worked?
I thought that that's what was going to happen. I did. But after sitting in jail for months, sometimes it takes months and months before your probation officer will come to you. And I thought surely they were going to revoke my probation. Surely, I was on first offender. Because I thought I'm never going to do anything again. This is insane, But I found out in the first week that time when I went to medical, they called me back again. And I'm like, I've already had my blood taken. I'm not going to do this again, because every time you go in, they have to do this whole thing. You have to get your blood taken and have to do all these tests, make sure, and everything's okay. And so they called me back and I was like, do you need to take more blood? And she was like, no, I need you to lay right here on this table for me. Like, why? I just need you to lay here for me, please. And she pulled my shirt up and she started to do like an ultrasound. I was like, what? She was like, I need you to turn around and look right here for me. And did you know they're not supposed to show you when you're incarcerated? They're not supposed to show you the ultrasound screen. I didn't know that until that moment. She was like, I'm not supposed to show this to you, but I need you to see this right now. And I was pregnant. And I thought, there's no way. This monstrous kid, there is no way. Because it was not consensual so many times. I just couldn't believe it, And then that brought everything back to me. So I went back to the dorm and I sat there and the girls were like, hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. I'm like, is it though? Because if my probation gets revoked, I will have this baby in prison. I will go back. I wasn't even taking care of my son. I had not seen my son, and I don't even know, probably about 6 months at that point. I missed his first day of kindergarten. And you never think that that's important, but it's so important. Oh God.
I think moments like that are equally important to us as parents. And I've missed kindergarten graduations, first day of kindergarten, high school graduation. So I feel all of that. I feel all of it. And we can't continue to torture ourselves for those things. There has to be a decision to move forward. And I know you've made that decision, but also know that it's not, once you make the decision to forgive yourself and to move forward and to make new memories and live for today, it's not just a line where all of that guilt just all of a sudden goes away. It's a whole cycle. And so we are going to be feeling that guilt for a long time, baby. And it's something that we're having to deal with. Both of us are kind of really similar in that aspect. And I respect you so much for, yes, moving forward. So how did that go after? Did you tell him that you were pregnant with his baby? What happened?
At that point, none of my family wanted anything to do with me, So I didn't have any money on my books, no extra soups, no nothing. But when you're pregnant, and I will tell you, they will give you extra snacks, which is a good thing. And I could sell my milk. I got extra milk. Sold that for extra noodles and stuff. But I did contact him through email. And he told me, which I got to save those emails, thank goodness, because they came through a jail database. He told me that I should do us both a favor and throw myself off the balcony. Wow, So that helped solidify a lot of things for me. My probation officer finally come to see me and he said, I want to send you to this rehab where you can have your children or have your baby there, but it's a long program and I want you to complete the whole thing. I was like, what? Look, I don't have a drug problem. I still didn't think I had a drug problem. Okay. He said, well, then I'm going to revoke your first offender. I was like, okay, sign me up, Sonny. Give me the waiver. I'll sign it, run it all day long. Right. Well, it was 13 weeks, 13 weeks until they would have a bed available. 13 weeks. Do you know how long that is when you're in there? I know you know this. I know you know. But I'm like, okay, I've already been in here way too long. So another county had a hold on me for something I had stolen from else. And it turns out I really didn't steal the ring. I really didn't do that. But I went to the other county. But when I signed the waiver, the county, my probation did put a hold on me. So when I got out, when those charges were dismissed, I got to get out and live with my grandmother for the rest of those, like, I think it was about 6 weeks I had left. And my son came and I called him every single night. And I get to hold him and love on him. And I remember the first time I saw him when I got out, he just sat on the ground in the dirt, and he was just crying uncontrollably. He was just like, "Mommy," and something broke inside of me that day. When I had to explain to him where I'd been, I didn't want to lie. The best way I knew to explain it was, you get in trouble and you have to go to timeout. Mommy was in a timeout. Just when you're grown up and you do bad things, your time out, it's away from your family. I said, I'm going to try my very best. But during that time of being incarcerated, again, I say that all the time, again, because, it's a revolving door. Something broke in me morally that I just knew I did not ever want to do that again. I was sick of the smell. I was sick of having to survive, I guess, in a different way. They called me and I went. I wasn't going to. I was going to be like, no, I can do this out here. But I really couldn't. So I went and I did 7 months of inpatient. And during that time, I worked through trauma and I went to intensive counseling and I lived with 40 women, which I was used to being incarcerated. So it really wasn't a big deal to me, So I learned so much about what had happened to me that contributed to who I was. But also, it didn't have to define to who I was going to be, who I was becoming. I became resilient and strong and determined. But also, I came to know God instead of just knowing of Him. And I allowed Him to love me, the one who had messed up so much and been so horrible. Um, but I gained things that I had not had since childhood, like your honesty and your integrity and your love and your kindness and your patience, your understanding, wisdom, strength was something I didn't realize I carried the whole way through because I didn't let anything kill me, any person kill me. After those 7 months, I went to their transitional program and I lived there for 9 months and I did outpatient for 9 months. So I did the 7 months of inpatient, 9 months of outpatient. And then I got my own place in the housing authority. Loving the projects, loved them because it was mine. And I gave birth to this beautiful baby girl. And she was so full of life and just with the sweetest little voice. And so once I did that, I went back to court and I got joint custody of my son back. I got joint custody of my son back. I had no man for about 2.5 years. None. Completed the outpatient and then I got my own car. It was a Honda Accord and I was so proud of that thing. It was so beautiful. I was like, yes, I met a woman in one of the meetings that I was going through. Daughter was when I was pregnant with my daughter. I'm thinking about starting a recovery community organization. You can help. Like, what? She was like, yeah. I remember feeling something in her meeting, just a meeting, in a borrowed building with about 15 people, 15 of us. I said, yeah, absolutely. So then got to be a part of creating a recovery community organization in my field. I got to do that. I got to help create it. I got to help get a new building and clean it and paint the walls. And then I became one of the first employees there when we got funding. And then I got to build it and grow it and become the director. I was an executive director. I went back to school. I am in the current process of getting my bachelor's degree, and I'm going to finish that. I met a man this time, and I'm married for love, not because I felt like I had to. There are still men that open doors and love you and support you where you are and know everything and still love everything about you. We bought a house and we have chickens and we have goats and we have a dog and we have cats and we've had pigs and we have 5 acres of land that is ours. I'm a certified peer specialist and of addictive disease. I'm a certified peer specialist of mental health. I'm a forensic peer mentor. I have taken trauma informed care classes. And I had a business bank account in my name after having forgeries of it. People in recovery, once we change, once we are determined and we take everything that we know, everything that we've learned, everything that's a part of us, and we turn it around for good, we can do anything.
Wow. Like, wow, wow. And I've been in and out of teary-eyed through your whole journey. You have overcome so much. You are such an inspiration to myself. And I know that this story is going to inspire so many people. Goodness gracious, I am. I'm wondering, the program that you were at, it was court ordered. So is it a state program that's available in Georgia?
It is. It is. And I go back and forth between what I have seen in being a peer coach is, and we know this as people in recovery, and recovery to me is not just the abstinence of drugs and alcohol. That's not what that is. Recovery to me is finding what abstaining from using like that, where your life is unmanageable, right? But it's the changing everything else part that I think we all get hung up on. So when you're in recovery, you're changing everything else. You're changing your inside, you're working through trauma, you're gaining back that honesty and integrity. And for me, it was changing everything from the inside out. It was changing absolutely everything. So the sober part became the easy part. It was a change in the everything else part, the behaviors, the thinking patterns, to watching to what I say, how I moved, how I presented myself, all of those things. And it is a state program, but I feel like if I wasn't ready, it wouldn't have worked anyways. It wouldn't have. If I didn't decide this is it for me and I'm done, I want a better life. I want my children to have a better life. Then it wouldn't have worked.
There were several kind of red flags in your young womanhood, 16, 17, 18, that were kind of telling the community, hey, I need help. Hey, something's going on with me. And I'm just wondering what it could have looked like if we were able to help you as a community at that age instead of kind of the aftermath.
Absolutely. I feel like number one, what I learned when I had my daughter was when you go to have a baby, women do not need to come home with Percocets, okay? Because I refused those with my daughter and that I had in recovery, and I got 800 milligram ibuprofen. Guess what? They work just as well. They work just as well. They do. You do not have to be sent home with Percocets after having a baby. I'm really sorry. And if you did not have a C-section, then you're fine. I had a tubal after me and my husband, my current husband now that I am crazy about for years and years now, but we had a daughter as well. And my daughter has his name too. So he adopted her, and it is it's beautiful. But with both of them, I didn't come home with any Percocets. Came home with 800 milligram ibuprofen. And then when I had a tubal after her, had my tubes tied. Her name's Remington Faith because she is beautiful, but she I didn't come home with Percocets even after a tubal, and that hurt me. It hurt. It hurt. I'm just gonna tell you, you feel like everything's gonna fall out after you're done, but I I just chose not to because I knew that I did not want that part of me activated again at all. I did no, no. And it's remembering what triggered you in the first place. It's remembering what happened. But also, when a teenager overdoses, you don't need to just drop them off at a place, or you don't need to just suspend them or kick them out of school. It's how can I help you, not just kick them out. There was nothing beyond that done except for you're expelled. You can't be here anymore. What? You know, there was no questions like, is there anything going on at home? Is there, did something happen? Did somebody make you take these? Or, I mean, there was nothing. It was nothing. Nothing was there.
Punishment. It was just punishment.
Just punishment.
Can we talk briefly about your oldest son experienced some trauma because of your substance abuse disorder? And can we talk about how you're rebuilding trust with him, or how you have rebuilt trust and how you have worked on that relationship?
Absolutely, yes. And that was really hard for me and my son. My son will be turning 13. So he is coming into got armpit hair, it kind of freaks me out. But he is over the years, the past 8 years or so, it's been really hard for us. I remember a couple of years in, like he used to be so happy to see me when I'd show up to get him at school. And I remember one Friday I showed up and I told my friend, I said, he was just like, hey, mom, she was like, Catherine, you should actually be excited about that because he is no longer shocked to see you. He knows that consistency's back. He knows his mom's going to show up. He knows you're going to show up no matter what. And we've had moments of him remembering things like, you remember when we used, because we still live in the same town, and he was young, but he remembers. We were actually, I was taking him to his dad's, because after school they're going, school's about to be over, so they're going to go on a cruise with his dad and his stepmom, and she's fabulous. She's really great. Like me and Mike's husband had to work hard to be where we are now, but my son's been playing soccer for the past couple years, and if you look at most of the games and the practices, it's me and his stepmom. Or a lot of the games, it's been my two girls and me and my husband and my ex-husband and his wife, all right there, sitting right next to each other. Where does that happen? My husband at first was like, this is so weird. I said, but it's not about us. It's about Lucas. It's about our son, and it can be done. People think that it cannot be done, but when you put things aside and you make it about the child, it can be done. And when I was driving to go take him home one day and or take him to his dad's, and he said, you remember when we used to live there? And it was the place that we walked out of. It was an apartment. And I said, yes, honey, I do. I said, and I didn't say anything. And I had that feeling in my stomach again, like, oh, I just hate even thinking about that time, And I said, do you want to talk about it? And he said, no, we've talked about it a bunch. He said, you're not like that anymore. When he gets heated and his testosterone preteen hormones get going, he was yelling at me not too long ago about something. I can't even remember what it was. You just let the girls do whatever they want to do, and you get on to me. And you didn't do that when I was little. You were so hard on me. And so I have to work through that. And of course, my husband's like coming through the house, like about to get on him because he's yelling at me. And I'm just like, whoa, whoa. I've taken a lot of parenting classes and press-based relational interviewing stuff for children. And so I have learned just to say, son, I don't know why you're yelling at me because I'm not yelling at you. And I'm sorry. I can't change who I used to be, but I can tell you for 7+ years, I've consistently showed up. And I'm going to continue to consistently show up. I'm older and I have more patience and I've learned a lot about parenting. And there's still no book to tell me what to do. And I'm sorry that I wasn't that person for you, but I will not be punished for it for my whole life, even though we feel like we should be. But there's a point where we're not because we have recovered and we have healed and still in the process of healing. And our journey is to hear them out. And our job as parents is to hear them out and comfort them, but also not to let them take advantage of that, to let them know that I haven't been that person in a very long time. And I love you. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to pay for it my whole life.
That's such beautiful advice. And I'm taking all of that into myself. And I know people that are hearing you say that now are taking it in because it can just, parents mess up on so many levels that don't have to do with addiction, that they don't have to do with incarceration. And we grow and change as people and as parents. And I just think that that is like universal. And it was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Catherine, you did such a lovely job of sharing your story. And I know you've told your testimony before, and that was very apparent today. And I just want to make sure and give you the opportunity and the space if there was anything else that has come to your mind that you wanted to share with us today.
I have learned too in recovery that I actually, after working and leading a recovery community organization in January of this year, I resigned. Not because I just hated it, just because it was so much and I worked a lot of hours. But I realized I was doing the same thing with my children, my girls now that I did in my addiction. I was physically present, but I wasn't mentally present because I was at work in my mind all the time, helping, saving other people, I thought, and I justified it by doing something good. So I just now I just subcontract. Started my own business. I have an LLC, Lovers Consulting, and I do mentorships and trainings and curriculum development. And I get to mentor people all over the US, in California and West Virginia and Indiana and Illinois and Texas and Florida. Like there's so many places. I'm mentoring somebody in Alaska right now about recovery community organizations. How huge is that? Like who would have ever thought? But also, I get to do that from home on my hours, on my terms, accept what I want when I want. And I get to be with my children. I'm not missing another second by letting something be bigger than they are. I'm going to every Easter egg hunt and letting my preschooler sleep till 8:30 if she wants, and then get her up and kiss on her and get her ready for school and be with my 6-year-old as she figures out kindergarten and homeschool her in the process. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. It can be so good.
It can be so good. And I hope that anybody that's kind of in the trenches right now can see your story and how life can be so good for everybody. And everybody is deserving of that, no matter what you've gone through and what you've done in the process as a reaction to your trauma. We do bad things, right? And yeah, thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate you. There might be people watching or listening now that need some consulting, that are interested in your services. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can contact me directly for Lover and Consulting at 706-728-8637, or they can email me at Catherine, Catherine, Heaton, Heaton, number 6 at gmail.com.
And I'll make sure and put those in the description of this video so you guys can contact Catherine if you need her. Thanks so much. I appreciate you tremendously.
Thank you so much, Marci. You've been fabulous.